Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP discovers his girlfriend's cheating when he contracts an STD. As he investigates, he finds evidence of her affair with her guitar instructor. Faced with betrayal, he confronts her, with support from their roommates to end the toxic living situation. After she moves out, he takes revenge on the instructor, ensuring he faces consequences for his actions. Now let's get into the story. My girlfriend and I started dating in college during our senior year, and we had been together ever since. After graduation, she and I moved into a house with a couple of our other friends from school. None of us had great jobs, so we were kind of forced into that living situation because it was all we could afford. At the time, we didn't think about the issues that we would face living together so soon in our relationship. Now, as an adult with more experience, I would never start living with someone after only dating them for 6 months. At the time, though, it seemed like the best thing in the world. During the pandemic, we were both working at home, sharing a bedroom, and virtually unable to leave the house. Don't get me wrong, I loved her. Even though we had our difficulties, she was somebody that I saw myself being with forever. I honestly figured that a lot of the issues that we had were because of our proximity and just being around each other 24/7. Everybody needs space in a relationship, and it wasn't possible for us. When things started to improve, and we were both able to work hybrid in our offices, we were very excited. I felt like we had some breathing room again, and the relationship started getting back to normal. We also started doing things to spend a little more time apart. That sounds bad, but I think we both realized it was what we needed for the relationship. I was very active in the fitness community, and she was learning how to play the guitar. After a couple of months of us being apart more often, things started to feel like they were back to normal. Throughout our entire relationship, our intimate life had always been amazing. Even when we were arguing with each other, it never really slowed down. I started to notice after we were spending more time apart that she seemed less interested in me. I was so used to us having intimate at least 4 or 5 times a week that it struck me as odd. I was the only one initiating it when it happened, which was also unusual. She didn't seem disinterested, but when we were finished, there was a disconnect. We weren't cuddling as much, or there wasn't as much pillow talk after. It felt impersonal. Over time, intimacy with us became more of a rarity. I talked to some of my friends about it, and they told me that it could be normal in long-term relationships to feel that disinterest. They also suggested that maybe my girlfriend was having a tough time emotionally or mentally. I decided to talk to her about it one night, and she told me that there wasn't anything going on, that she just hadn't been thinking about it. We ended up having intimate after that conversation when we both established what was going on. I won't get into all of the gory details, but a couple of weeks later I started noticing some issues I was having with my genitals, so I went to the doctor. He told me that I had a nasty day. I was surprised to hear that and immediately thought it was wrong. The only person I was having intimate with was my girlfriend, and I knew that she and I were both negative for everything. Admittedly, we weren't testing often because when we started dating we were both negative for everything. I figured it must have been something that I picked up at the gym or from sharing a drink with someone. But the doctor told me that the likelihood of me getting the particular disease that I had that way was slim. There was a 99% chance that it was transmitted to me sexually. I drove home and thought about how I was going to tell my girlfriend. At the time, it never occurred to me that she was the one who gave me the STD. I trusted her, and I never would have thought that she would do something to hurt me, but eventually, I started to put the pieces together. Obviously, I had to get the STD from somewhere. If I didn't get it through other means, the only way that I got it was through my girlfriend. The question was, how did she get it? I started thinking about how distant she had been and how much time we were spending apart, and it clicked. She must have been having some kind of affair. I figured that if she lied about it as long as she did, she probably wasn't going to tell the truth when I confronted her. I wanted to see what was happening without allowing her to cover anything up or lie about it. She knew that I was going to the doctor because of an issue that I was having, so it was very likely that she was already aware of the STD. She had to have had it too. I composed myself and prepared for all the questions she was probably going to ask me. When she did, I told her that the doctor examined me and ran some tests, but I wouldn't know the results for a few days. I figured that would give me some time to do some digging and see what was really going on. Later that night, I went through her phone. I saw a recent text message chat with her guitar instructor and I clicked on it. Their most recent messages were talking about how I was going to the doctor to get tested. They were both swearing up and down that they didn't have any symptoms and didn't know, but they both planned on going too. That alone told me that they were sleeping together, but I read through other messages while I was looking. It seemed like my girlfriend met him in a cafe and started talking to him about starting guitar lessons. From there, she decided to go, and after her first lesson, he told her he liked her. She actually told him that she had a boyfriend and he said that he didn't care. From there, they came up with a plan to hook up for the first time without a friend knowing. It was a tricky situation trying to figure out how to break up with my girlfriend. We still lived together and we were on a lease together, which legally bound us to stay in the same apartment. However, when we moved, all of us got together and made a roommate agreement that we all signed where we went over some house rules. We wanted a drama-free, good environment for everybody to live in. If we felt like there was any sort of hostility or negativity, if we had a majority vote, we could get somebody else to move out. I didn't know if a document like that would hold up if I wanted my girlfriend to move out, but I figured I could at least bring it up. I sent myself evidence from those messages, and I pretended like everything was fine for the next couple of days. I read through our lease and the document that all four of us made together to try to figure out what my best option would be. I wanted my girlfriend out of the house. I knew it was going to be a struggle for her to find another place to live and to pay for it on her own, and I wanted her to go through that. My girlfriend kept asking me about the results of my test, and I kept lying to her and telling her that I was still waiting. I pulled my other roommates aside one day while she was out for her guitar lesson, and I told them about what was going on. They were as shocked as I was by the news, but they seemed to be on my side. She was a liar, and she was a cheater who would take that side. I told them about the document, and they said that if I wanted to stay, they would be on my side and would do what they had to help get her to leave. She came home later that day to find all three of us sitting in the living room and waiting for her. I told her everything, telling her that she transmitted an STD to me because of her affair, and that I knew about what was happening with her guitar instructor. She tried to apologize and pull me aside to explain what was happening in more detail, but I didn't want to listen. I told her that we needed to talk about the living arrangements because I was breaking up with her. After that, she started getting defensive. She clearly didn't want to move out. Our other roommates were on my side, and they were with me in voting to kick her out of the house. She said that she was going to stay because the document we had wasn't legally binding. But one of my roommates brought up that since we all agreed to it and signed it, it would likely hold up in court. I told my girlfriend that I was willing to go to court over the matter. I think she realized that the living situation was going to be uncomfortable, and she decided that moving out would probably be the best option for her. While she was in the process of doing that, I ended up going home for a week to avoid her. While I was there, I just kept thinking about the guitar instructor and how he said he didn't care that she was in a relationship. Clearly, if he was transmitting an STD to her, he was sleeping around recklessly. I looked him up online, and I saw that he had a decent following for his social media accounts. He was trying really hard to make a name for himself as a musician. A lot of the followers that he had thought he was cute and were shooting their shots with him. I decided to put an end to that. I commented on a bunch of his posts about how he gave an STD to my girlfriend. I left reviews on his business accounts, and I even made a TikTok to make a video explaining everything. He blocked me when he realized what was happening, but I made more accounts. It was to the point where he was turning comments off on some of his videos. The thing about not having comments on videos is that it gets less engagement. He was getting much less traction than he was before, which was my goal. When my girlfriend officially moved out, I went back home and I was happy to be without her. I'm just glad that it's over now. Today's second story. In this story, OP was married for 20 years to his high school sweetheart. However, his wife's behavior changed, and he discovered her infidelity with a new couple in town. Shocked and betrayed, he divorced her and publicly addressed the affair in a sermon. The town reacted strongly against his ex-wife and her affair partners. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I had been together for 20 years before we ended our marriage. We met when we were both in high school. I had just moved into the area and I didn't know anybody in town. She was always very friendly to me, and I immediately took a liking to her. She was sweet, kind, and most importantly, she had the same relationship with God as me. I'd always dreamed of becoming a pastor, so after college, we weighed the options. We eventually decided it wasn't feasible at the time, so we got jobs. After about 5 years, I reached a certain point where I was deeply unhappy with my work and I needed change. My wife stood by me while I got an associate's degree in theology. After that, I threw myself into studying everything there was to know about Christianity, and I did everything I needed to become a pastor. We opened our own church, and after a while our congregation grew. I couldn't have done any of it without the help of my wife. She was my rock through all of it, and I still have so much love for her because of that. Religion has always been important to both of us, and I know a lot of people assume that closed-door activities can be a little bit bland. I will comment briefly on that it wasn't for us. We were a married couple, and nothing we did behind closed doors that we were both fully consenting to was sinful in any way. That being said, the only thing that had ever been brought up that I didn't think was right was bringing another person into the bedroom. The problem started for us when a new family moved into town. We met them when they stopped by the church to ask about baptizing their son. My wife and I wanted to make sure they were happy in the community, so we gave them all the information about the church and told them to come to the following Sunday sermon. We were happy to see them there, and we introduced them to the rest of the people in our town. At the end of it, we invited them over for dinner so we could get to know them a little bit better. They came over later that night and we had a great time with them. They kept coming back on Sundays to see us. I was happy that we had some new members for the church, and I was also happy to see that they were integrating with the community well through it. My wife ran a weekly community service group that didn't have very many volunteers. She would have some around major holidays like Christmas or Easter, but throughout the rest of the year, it was normally just her and maybe 1 or 2 other people. One day my wife came home from her community service and happily told me that the new couple had joined the group. I was excited by the news. Over the following months, we spent more and more time with them, and they became close friends of ours. We saw them regularly for dinners, and we even hung out with them outside of the church for double dates and things like that. My wife was the only woman that I had ever been with, and as far as I was aware, she had never broken the bonds of our marriage. I had no idea what to look out for as far as cheating went. I know now that she was acting strangely for a while, but at the time nothing stood up to me. One of the biggest indicators that I missed was how she started volunteering on extra days during the week. The entire time we were in the church, she would always volunteer on Thursdays. Suddenly, she was volunteering on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and the occasional Saturday. I was always very busy maintaining the church and planning sermons, so I wasn't always able to help her with the service. I first noticed that something was off when she was making her announcements on Sunday and mentioned her Thursday community service group. I had been under the assumption that the Tuesday and Saturday groups were the same thing. I didn't understand why she didn't mention the extra days, especially if that might open up the door for other members to volunteer. When I approached the altar to give my sermon, I added an addendum to what she said, telling them about the additional days. When the sermon was over, she seemed to be irritated with me. I asked her about what was wrong, and she told me that I undermined her by correcting her in front of everybody and embarrassed her. On top of that, she told me that they weren't doing the Tuesday and Saturday volunteer days that week. I apologized and told her that I never meant to embarrass her. However, I went to my office and I saw that on our shared calendar, she had Tuesday marked off for volunteering. Her story wasn't quite adding up to me. I started to think that there was something off, though I didn't know what exactly it could have been. Infidelity never crossed my mind. Part of me assumed she had some kind of guilty pleasure that she was participating in that she didn't want me to know about. I didn't like that she was keeping something a secret from me, but we had been married for so long and we knew everything about each other that I felt she might have been entitled to have something to herself. I found out the truth of the matter when I decided to join her in her community service group. It was the week before Easter Sunday, so I already knew my sermon like the back of my hand. That Tuesday blocked off on her calendar for volunteering, so I decided that I would join her in the spare time that I had. When I went to join her in the recreation room of the church, nobody was there. I texted her and asked her about where they were because I planned on joining them, but I never got a response. That was unlike her, so I was immediately worried about her. I thought that she might have gone home, so I made my way there and saw that her car was in the driveway. Instantly, I was relieved. I figured that nobody showed up to volunteer with her, so she must have canceled it. I walked inside and heard some very strange noises coming from the basement. We had a partially finished basement with one room that was being remodeled into a guest bedroom for my mother to come and live with us. With the thudding noises, I thought that she might have been down there assembling some furniture or doing some work now that she was free. I put my things down and went downstairs to help her. Instead of finding her in the middle of remodeling the basement, I saw her having relations with the new couple, both of them. I was in complete shock. It was the last thing I ever expected to see my wife in the middle of. They saw me and immediately stopped what they were doing. My wife approached me trying to explain what was happening, but I was so shaken by everything that I could hardly hear what she was saying. I walked upstairs and into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. It was a lot to process. I thought she was the love of my life. I trusted her more than anybody else in the world, and I gave everything I had to her. In turn, she broke the vow of our marriage. She was banging on the door and trying to get in because she thought I was hurting myself when I was really just sitting on the bed. Eventually, she had the man from the couple break down the door. I was practically catatonic. I never got angry. I've always been very calm and collected, but seeing them all there staring at me like they were concerned about me filled me with such a fury that I was shaking. I yelled at all three of them, and I told them that they needed to leave. After I collected myself, I reached out to a divorce attorney and I explained that I saw my wife cheating on me. Unfortunately, they recognized my name and they knew my wife. I wanted to keep everything a secret, but I didn't think it was going to be possible. My wife begged me to forgive her and give her a second chance, telling me that it was the godly thing to do. I didn't have it in me to do that. I told her that we were over and that I was going to be divorcing her, so she should get an attorney herself. Easter Sunday was very difficult because we wanted to be perceived as normal as possible because of what the holiday meant to everyone in attendance. It was difficult to put a smile on my face and be around her. The following Sunday, my wife did not give the opening announcements as she always did after the music. I could see that there were some confused faces in the congregation. I didn't want to share the news with them, but I wanted them to hear it from me rather than from everybody else in town. I explained that my wife and I were getting divorced due to my infidelity. The rest of the sermon was dedicated to my wife and the couple that she was having an affair with. It was about infidelity and how sinful it was to break a sacred marriage vow. In hindsight, it might have been a little bit bitter, but it was where my heart was at the time. I divorced my wife. The attorney that I worked with was exceptional, and they made sure I was well taken care of. I didn't make a lot of money as a pastor, so they made sure I did not have to pay anything in spousal support to my wife. I was able to keep the house, and I moved my mother in a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. My wife is almost treated like a pariah in town. I have very conflicting emotions about this because she hurt me, and a part of me thinks that she deserves this, but another part doesn't think that anybody should harbor hate in their hearts. The couple that she was having an affair with has been outcast from most of the town after what they did. Rumors spread, and I don't think they were able to clear anything up. Now I am focusing on my church and rebuilding my life without my wife present. It's actually very strange how many of the women in the congregation have been reaching out to me and asking me if there was anything they could do for me. Some of them are single women, divorced, widows, etc. I can tell that they're coming on to me in some ways, but I don't know if I'm ready to be in another relationship yet.